Hi, I'm Cynthia Davis, and my canonical works presentation is from Marshall McLuhan. I looked at certain sections of his 1964 Understanding Media, chapters 1, 23, 24, and 28, and also his 1967 remix of those concepts, which he did in The Medium is the Massage. The premise of the medium being the message is that, and this quote is actually from his Understanding Media, the first chapter, which is called The Medium is the Message. And he says, the medium is the message. This is merely to say that the personal and social consequences of any medium, that is, any extension of ourselves, result from the new scale that is introduced into our affairs by each extension of ourselves or by any new technology. According to McLuhan, all media are extensions of some human faculty, the psychic or psychological or the physical. For instance, the wheel we can look at as an extension of our foot. We can go further with the wheel. The book is then an extension of the eye, and clothing an extension of the skin, and etc., etc., etc. These images are actually from his The Medium is the Massage, which is really a trippy little book with all kinds of graphics and pictures. Really a fun read, actually. Some themes that come up throughout McLuhan. The eye has replaced the ear. Print technology encouraged fragmentation. Fragmentation is a concept that McLuhan looks at as people being very specialized and looking at very specific information on their own time frame. And electronic technology kind of flipped things around where it fosters unification, or everyone kind of globally seeing some of the same information. Um, he says, before print technology, we lived in an auditory world with constant input. With the advent of print, specialization or detachment grew as people were able to retreat into linear sequential words of print, selecting input of their own choosing and on their own timetable. And that's why this image here is an ear where the eye is. And that's why he's saying really that the eye has replaced the ear. We hear sounds simultaneously. So that's why he says before print, everything was auditory. And then when the alphabet came into being, people started kind of selecting their own literature, selecting their own input. And he also made an interesting comment that the ear, there's no such thing as an ear lid. We can't shut off what we hear, but we can shut off what we see. So that's kind of the premise of where he's coming from with a shift once electronic media came into play, where we're no longer an auditory world. According to McLuhan, movies aided this transition from the linear sequential events to what he calls creative configurations, everything happening all at once. He also notes that Cubism came on the art scene just as movies became highly influenced by what he calls electronic speed. Suddenly, everything was simultaneous, inclusive, and encouraging of involvement. And this is a cartoon which appeared in the New Yorker. It's depicting a college student coming home, and he says, "You see, Dad, Professor McLuhan says that the environment the man creates becomes his medium for defining his role in it. The invention of type created linear or sequential thought, separating thought from action. Now with TV and folk singing, thought and action are closer and social involvement is greater. We again live in a village. Get it?" And what this cartoon is kind of saying is this flip that we have when electronic media just started exploding. We have more of this globalization or unification as opposed to the linear sequential type of input that we get from print text. So let's look at what McLuhan says about some various uh, some various concepts. These are from the chapters from Understanding Media. Um, he looks at, in one chapter, chapter 20, he looks at photography. He calls it the brothel without walls. Why does he call it that? Well, movie stars and matinee idols are put into the public domain by photography. They become dreams that money can buy. And so that is the idea of why he calls it a brothel. He also says the photograph wipes out our national frontiers and cultural barriers. And that's for better or for worse, because there are good and bad effects. For instance, he says that travel is no longer strange and unfamiliar. Fashion is at the mercy of abrupt seasonal changes of visual posture. He made reference to children looking at a magazine that's just a couple months old and calling the styles old fashioned. Fashion can change very rapidly. And so, as photography made this all accessible, it flips a lot, it changes. Photography has caused the world to become what he calls a museum of objects, and pictures add to McLuhan's unification concept by offering statements without syntax. That is, just images without context. So again, we're all kind of seeing this stuff in pictures that unifies us, and it comes very quickly, kind of like hearing coming, that metaphor of the ear. We hear things all around us without choosing, and layered and constant. And he's saying that photography is kind of adding to that idea. Um, Advertising, keeping upset with the Joneses. That's his title of chapter 23. The 60s, as we know from Mad Men, is the golden age of advertising. Um, the product, he says, matters less as audience participation increases. And some ideas that he looks at in this chapter is the product is an integral part of large social purposes and processes. Ads are subliminal pills for the subconscious. He says they are not meant to be digested, to be looked at seriously. They're subliminal. And he also says that far more thought and care go into the production of an ad than any editorial or feature story. That the ad is an art form in of itself. The goal of advertising is to homogenize social life. Again, fragmentation versus unification. Unification is everyone is looking at the same images and wanting the same products that they're seeing in ads, bringing this global idea together, community, a global village. Um, Games is another type of media that McLuhan looks at. Games are another extension of man, and this was what he looked at in chapter 24 of Understanding Media. As extensions of the popular response to the workaday stress, games become faithful models of a culture, says McLuhan. He also says we enjoy those games most that mimic other situations in our work and social lives. The result here, what he looks at in this chapter is games are media of interpersonal communication. Again, it's just a way for society to communicate with each other. A game is an extension of the individual or group. The social practices of one generation tend to get codified into the games of the next. And then he went into TV shows, and he looked at TV shows as what he called a defeat of the spirit of gaming. He said the big prize of the big financial reward, in his opinion, made a mockery of money, which then he said created high audience participation, which again is this globalization idea. Everyone's involved, and he calls the producers of televised games con men. So that's what he looked at as far as gaming. He also looked at the phonograph, the toy that shrank the national chest. That's chapter 28 of Understanding Media. He says the world of sound is essentially a unified field of instant relationships. It's been called the graphophone, with the needle in the role of the pen. That's what he says in Understanding Media. LPs are non-participatory, making them the audio equivalent of linear sequential print. However, LPs brought depth into the musical experience, bringing both pop and classical music to the masses. And then he said that it took the participatory medium of radio to give the record the full electric charge, is what he called it. It made it more interactive by these songs actually being on the radio. That makes them more interactive and people are getting more involved in them. And then we end with the quote from Alice in Wonderland that McLuhan ends his medium is the massage with. At least I knew who I was when I got up this morning, but I think I must have changed several times since then. And he has this image of kind of anonymous people, and that's McLuhan in the center. So that is my presentation on the canonical works. Thanks for listening. Bye.